A young boy grew up in a quiet neighborhood where the streets were filled with laughter, bicycle races, and the sounds of children chasing their dreams. From the very beginning, he was different from the others. While most kids spent their afternoons with toys or simple games, he had one true passion: martial arts. His eyes would light up whenever he saw people practicing kicks and punches, whether it was at a nearby park or on television. He was fascinated by the speed, the control, the discipline it seemed to demand. His first introduction to Taekwondo was almost accidental. One day, while walking past a small gym with his father, he stopped at the sound of feet stomping on mats and the sharp kia, cries echoing from inside. Curious, he peeked through the glass window. Inside, a group of young students were practicing high kicks with unbelievable precision. Their uniforms were crisp, their movements synchronized, and the respect they showed their teacher left a lasting impression on him. He tugged at his father's sleeve and whispered, "I want to do that." His father smiled, surprised but supportive. And the next week, he was enrolled in his first Taekwondo class. From the very beginning, he stood out. He wasn't the tallest, nor the strongest, but he was quick and sharp. What made him special wasn't natural talent alone, it was his determination. If he was asked to practice a kick 10 times, he would do it 20. If he stumbled during a drill, he would start again until he got it right. His teacher noticed this early on and often reminded the other students, "Look at his focus." This is how progress is made. Slowly, the boy became not just a student, but an example. At home, he continued his practice. The living room walls sometimes shook as he practiced his spinning kicks. His mother would laugh, telling him not to knock over the furniture, but deep down she was proud of his dedication. His siblings would tease him about constantly wearing his uniform, but they also admired his energy. He wasn't just learning martial arts. He was shaping his character, discipline, respect. And resilience became his way of life. As years passed, he began competing in small local tournaments. At first, he felt nervous standing on the mat with an audience watching. But as soon as the referee signaled the start, his nerves melted away, replaced by instinct and training. His kicks were fast, his footwork precise, and his courage unwavering. Match after match, he gained victories, and soon his name started spreading among the local martial arts community. People began to notice the young fighter with extraordinary talent and determination. Victories, however, never made him arrogant. After each competition, he bowed deeply to his opponents and thanked his coaches. He believed that every fighter he faced taught him something new. Some opponents were faster, some were stronger, but each one helped him sharpen his skills. This humility earned him not only respect but also friends in the martial arts circle. Many admired how someone so young could balance confidence with respect. Over time, his ambitions grew. Local tournaments were no longer enough for him. He wanted to test himself at a higher level. He started entering regional championships where the competition was much tougher. Fighters came from different cities, each bringing unique styles and techniques. Some had been training since early childhood. Others were national-level players. The challenges were intense, but he thrived under pressure. Every morning, he woke up early to practice. His day began with stretching, running, and strength training. Even before school, he made sure his body was pushed to the limit. After classes, he would head straight to the dojo, where hours of sparring and drills awaited him. He often returned home exhausted, but never once did he complain. For him, martial arts wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was his dream, his purpose. As the competitions grew bigger, so did the crowds. Audiences cheered loudly during his matches, and he felt an energy unlike anything else. With each tournament he won, his reputation as a Taekwondo champion grew stronger. Coaches, referees, and fellow competitors began recognizing him as a rising star. Reporters even wrote short notes about him in local sports columns, calling him the boy with lightning kicks. His family, too, felt the pride. His father often recalled the day when his son first tugged at his sleeve outside that small gym, and how far he had come since then. His mother, though still worried about injuries, supported him wholeheartedly, making sure he ate healthy meals and rested when needed. His siblings, once teasing him about his obsession, now boasted to their friends that their brother was a champion, By his teenage years, he'd earned medals and trophies that lined the shelves of his room. Yet, to him, each medal was not just a prize, it was a story. A story of long hours of practice, of sweat dripping onto the mat, of moments when he nearly gave up, but didn't. Every victory reminded him of the journey behind it, and every loss fueled his desire to improve. What made his story even more compelling was his mindset. Unlike many who became overconfident with success, he always kept his heart humble. He often told younger students in his dojo, "It's not about being better than someone else. It's about being better than you were yesterday." Attitude not only made him a champion in competition, but also a leader in the eyes of his peers. It was during this period of success that he began hearing stories about legendary martial artists. Names like Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris came up often. He admired them greatly, watching old movies and interviews, studying their techniques, and even copying their training methods. For him, they weren't just celebrities. They were masters of the craft he loved most. Deep inside, he dreamed of one day meeting such legends, perhaps even testing his skills against them, though at the time it seemed like a fantasy. Little did he know that this dream would take an unexpected turn. His journey as a rising Taekwondo star was about to lead him into a challenge far greater than anything he had faced before. He had earned respect, built confidence, and developed extraordinary skill. But fate was preparing to test not just his talent, but his humility and understanding of true greatness. His path, filled with hard work and passion, was setting the stage for a moment he would never forget, a moment that would forever change how he viewed martial arts, himself, and the champions he admired. The young Taekwondo champion was now a name people remembered. Wherever he went, there was admiration in the eyes of fellow martial artists and curiosity in the hearts of those who heard about him for the first time. He had fought many opponents, some stronger and taller than him, but each time he managed to find a way to win. Victories had become common in his life, and with every medal that hung around his neck, his confidence grew. Deep inside, however, he felt a new kind of hunger, a desire to test himself against someone truly great, someone who could show him where his limits really were. This desire began to take shape when he started hearing more stories about Chuck Norris. At first, he knew him as an actor. He had seen the films where Norris displayed incredible fighting skills, swift punches, and powerful kicks. Like many others, he thought of him as a martial artist who became a movie star. The champion respected him, but never imagined that Norris had an even bigger legacy in real martial arts. What the young fighter did not know was that Chuck Norris was not just a performer in front of cameras. He was a six-time world karate champion, someone who had faced and defeated the best fighters from around the world. One day, news spread in the martial arts community that Chuck Norris would be attending a large gathering. It was not just a movie-related event. It was a martial arts exhibition where fighters, masters, and students from different styles would come together to share their knowledge, demonstrate their techniques, and celebrate the spirit of martial arts. For the young Taekwondo champion, this was an opportunity unlike any other. When he first heard the news, he could hardly believe it. Chuck Norris, the man he had admired from afar, was going to be in the same place. His friends buzzed with excitement too. Some were just thrilled to see a celebrity, but the champion felt something more. He felt a challenge growing inside his heart. He had beaten so many local and regional fighters, but now, here was a chance to face someone everyone looked up to. It was not arrogance that made him think of challenging Norris, it was the fire of ambition, the kind that pushes a fighter to test himself against the very best. On the day of the gathering, the venue was filled with energy. Students in their crisp uniforms lined the mats, bowing respectfully as masters entered the space. Demonstrations of styles like karate, judo, kung fu, and taekwondo filled the stage. The sound of wooden boards breaking echoed in the hall, and the sharp calls of martial artists filled the air. The young champion felt right at home in this atmosphere, surrounded by people who lived and breathed the same passion as he did. Then came the moment when Chuck Norris walked into the hall. The crowd erupted in cheers, not just because he was a star, but because many of them knew his true reputation in the martial arts world. He carried himself with calm confidence, his presence commanding respect without a single word. His smile was warm, his bow respectful. But everyone could sense the aura of a man who had mastered not only fighting techniques but also the discipline of the spirit. The young Taekwondo champion watched closely, his heart beating faster. He saw Norris move across the mat, and even in simple demonstrations. There was a sharpness and grace in his movements that revealed decades of training. For a moment, the young fighter felt a flicker of doubt. Could he really stand against someone like this? But the thought quickly faded. He had worked too hard, trained too long, and dreamed too big to back down now. When the time came for open sparring sessions, fighters were invited to step onto the mat to test their skills. Many chose partners from their own style, exchanging techniques and learning from each other. The young champion, however, felt his moment had arrived. With steady steps, he walked onto the mat, and in a voice clear enough for the crowd to hear, he made his challenge. "I want to face Chuck Norris." The hall fell silent for a brief moment. People turned their heads in surprise. Some chuckled softly, thinking it was the boldness of youth. Others looked on with wide eyes, realizing the seriousness of the challenge. His friends, standing at the side, were shocked but also proud of his courage. To them, it was an unbelievable sight, a young Taekwondo champion calling out a legend. Chuck Norris, calm as ever, turned his gaze toward the young fighter. There was no anger, no arrogance in his expression. Instead, there was a small smile, almost as if he respected the courage it took to say such words aloud. He nodded slowly, accepting the challenge, and the crowd began to murmur with excitement. Everyone knew they were about to witness something special. It was only at that moment that the young champion began to learn the truth. As whispers spread among the spectators, he overheard details he had never known before. Chuck Norris was not just a martial artist who acted in movies. He was a real competitor, a champion who had traveled the world and faced the fiercest fighters. He had won the World Professional Karate Championship not once but 6 times. Each title was proof of his skill, discipline, and unmatched experience. The realization struck the young fighter like a lightning bolt. He had thought he was stepping onto the mat with a movie star. But now he understood he was about to face one of the greatest martial artists in history. For a brief second, fear tried to enter his heart. His pride told him to stay strong, but deep inside, he wondered if he had made a mistake. Still, there was no turning back. He had spoken the challenge, and the mat was waiting. The crowd grew restless with anticipation. People whispered. Children leaned forward to see better. And masters nodded thoughtfully, recognizing the rare courage in the boy. The young champion adjusted his uniform, tightened his belt, and took a deep breath. Across the mat, Chuck Norris stood ready, his eyes calm, his stance relaxed. As though he had faced such challenges countless times before, in that moment the young fighter's thoughts raced. He remembered the years of training, the countless kicks, the hours of practice when others were asleep. He remembered the victories, the applause, and the pride of his family. All of that had brought him here, to this moment of truth. Whether he won or lost no longer mattered as much as the fact that he was about to stand face to face with greatness. The mat was set. The referee raised his hand, and the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. What began as a bold challenge was now transforming into a lesson that would stay with the young Taekwondo champion for the rest of his life. The moment had finally come. The young Taekwondo champion stood on the mat, his heart racing like a drum inside his chest. The air around him felt heavy, filled with the whispers and excitement of the crowd. His palms were slightly sweaty, but he clenched his fists, reminding himself of the countless hours he had trained, the countless times he had stood in front of opponents who thought they could beat him. Yet this time was different. This time, standing across from him, was Chuck Norris, man who wasn't just famous on television, but was. In reality, a 6-time world karate champion at first, the young fighter tried to steady his breathing. He reminded himself of the advice his coach had always given him. Every opponent is human. They can make mistakes. They can be defeated. Believe in your training. Those words gave him courage. Though his mind still replayed the shocking truth, he had just learned that Chuck Norris was not only a skilled martial artist, but also a proven champion who had already faced the best fighters. Around the globe, Chuck Norris stood calm. His posture relaxed but firm, his face composed. He wasn't showing off, he wasn't trying to intimidate, yet his very presence seemed powerful enough to unsettle even the most confident fighter. He looked at the young champion not as someone to crush, but as a challenger to respect, and that simple, humble attitude was more intimidating than arrogance could ever be. The referee gave the signal. Both fighters bowed deeply, a symbol of respect. Then they took their stances. The young champion's stance was sharp and quick. Traditional posture of Taekwondo on his feet, ready to unleash fast kicks. Chuck Norris, on the other hand, stood in a karate stance, balanced, grounded, and full of hidden strength. The crowd fell silent as the fight began. The young champion struck first. With lightning speed, he launched a high roundhouse kick, aiming for Chuck Norris's head. The kick was fast, the kind that had stunned many opponents before. But Norris moved with such calm precision that it shocked the boy. He didn't flinch or stumble, he simply shifted, blocked the kick with ease, and remained balanced. It was as if he had seen the move coming long before it even began. The boy tried again, this time mixing his attack side kicks, spinning kicks, quick steps to confuse his opponent. His moves were sharp, and the audience cheered at his energy. But once again, Chuck Norris countered each attempt with flawless timing. He blocked, deflected, and occasionally tapped back with light strikes that showed just how close he was to landing powerful blows if he wanted to. For the first time in his career, the young champion felt something new: helplessness. Against all his previous opponents, his speed and creativity had always given him an advantage. But here against Chuck Norris, every move seemed already predicted. Every strategy already answered. Minutes passed, though to the boy, it felt like hours. Sweat rolled down his face as he kept trying, determination burning inside him. He refused to give up. He threw combinations he had practiced thousands of times, desperate to land at least one clean strike. But Norris, with his years of experience, absorbed every attack with grace, never rushing, never panicking. Then came the moment that humbled the boy completely. He launched a powerful spinning kick, putting all his strength and speed into it. For a split second, the crowd gasped, thinking this might be the move to break through Norris's defense. But in one smooth motion, Norris sidestepped, lightly tapped the boy's shoulder, and brought him off balance. The young fighter stumbled, landing on the mat with a thud, not hurt, but completely disarmed. The crowd erupted in cheers, not mocking the boy, but admiring the mastery of Chuck Norris. It wasn't a crushing defeat, but a lesson displayed for all to see. Norris hadn't humiliated him. He had shown control, skill, and respect in every move. The young champion got up quickly, refusing to let his spirit break. He bowed again and continued the fight, even though exhaustion was setting in. His kicks became slower, his footwork less sharp, but his determination was unwavering. He wanted to show courage, even if he couldn't win. Norris noticed this and adjusted his style. He stopped countering with heavy power and instead began guiding the boy almost like a teacher in the middle of a match. When the boy tried a technique, Norris would allow him to finish it, then lightly demonstrate how to counter it more effectively. It was no longer just a fight. It was a lesson being taught in real time. The young fighter, though tired, began to realize what was happening. His opponent wasn't trying to defeat him mercilessly. Instead, Chuck Norris was showing him what true martial arts meant, not just speed or strength, but wisdom, patience, and control. The boy's fear slowly faded, replaced by respect. The audience, too, could feel it. The match was no longer about who would win or lose. It had become something much greater, passing of knowledge from a master to a student. A reminder that martial arts was about growth, respect, and humility, not just victory. As the fight continued, the boy gave everything he had left. His legs ached, his lungs burned, but he refused to stop. Each attempt, even when blocked, was a message to himself: I will not quit. I will keep fighting. And each time Norris responded with grace, showing him that even in defeat there was honor. Finally, after what felt like a long and exhausting exchange, the referee signaled the end. Both fighters stepped back and bowed. The young champion, drenched in sweat, breathing heavily, looked across at Norris. In his eyes was not frustration, but deep respect. He knew he had lost. But he also knew he had gained something far more valuable than a trophy or medal. Chuck Norris walked toward him, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said softly, "You are strong and you have courage. But remember, strength alone is not enough. Keep learning. Keep growing. That is the true path of a martial artist." The boy nodded, his heart swelling with both humility and inspiration. The crowd applauded loudly, some cheering for the boy's bravery, others for Norris's incredible display of mastery. Everyone in the hall knew they had witnessed something unforgettable. For the young champion, this was a turning point. He had stepped onto the mat thinking he could test his skills against a famous fighter, but he had discovered something much deeper. He had learned that true greatness was not about winning every fight. It was about having the wisdom to guide others, the humility to respect opponents, and the courage to never stop improving that day. His pride was shaken, but his spirit was strengthened. And as he walked off the mat, he carried with him not a sense of defeat, but a renewed determination. He had faced a legend, and in doing so, had discovered the path to becoming a true martial artist himself.
After that unforgettable encounter with Chuck Norris, the young Taekwondo champion walked away from the mat with his heart pounding, his mind racing, and a strange mixture of emotions swirling inside him. At first there was the undeniable sting of defeat. He had faced someone far more skilled than he had ever imagined, and though he had given everything, it had not been enough. But beneath that initial disappointment there was something far more powerful: inspiration. For the first time he saw what true mastery looked like, not flashy moves, not just speed or power, but a calm confidence, discipline, and intelligence that came from years of dedication. Back in his hotel room after the event, he sat quietly replaying every moment of the match in his mind. He remembered the precise timing of Chuck's blocks, the smooth way he redirected attacks, and the subtle shifts in balance that made each move so effective. The young champion realized that he had been talented and hardworking, yes, but there was a gap between his skill and true mastery, a gap that could only be closed with time, patience, and relentless training. He thought about his training back home, all the hours he had spent perfecting kicks, strengthening muscles, and memorizing techniques were important. But he now understood that martial arts was not just physical. It was mental, emotional, and spiritual. He realized that true champions didn't just rely on strength or speed. They studied their opponents, controlled their emotions, and moved with a wisdom that made even the strongest attacks almost harmless. That was what Chuck Norris had shown him, and it was a lesson he would never forget. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. The loss had left a mark, but it had also lit a fire. He was determined to learn from it. He began to think differently about his training. Before, he had focused mainly on what looked impressive: spinning kicks, high jumps, and quick attacks. Now he realized he needed to focus on fundamentals, timing, balance, and strategy. Every movement, he decided, would be deliberate, precise, and purposeful. He sought advice from his coaches and mentors, sharing the details of his experience. They listened carefully, impressed not only by his performance but by the humility and clarity he had gained. Together they redesigned his training plan. Mornings would begin with meditation and focus exercises to sharpen his mind. Afternoons would be reserved for endurance, flexibility, and strength training. Evenings would focus on sparring with partners who could challenge him in new ways. The young champion embraced this new approach, knowing that talent alone was not enough. Back at the dojo, he began to push himself harder than ever before. He practiced kicks over and over, not just for speed or height, but for accuracy and control. He sparred with every student willing to help, sometimes taking lessons even from those younger or less experienced than him, understanding that learning could come from any source. His movements became smoother, more calculated, and more effective. He learned to anticipate attacks, to read his opponent's intentions, and to respond with calm precision rather than reactionary force. As weeks turned into months, the change was noticeable. His coaches praised his progress, noting that his style had matured. He moved with purpose, blending Taekwondo techniques with a strategic understanding of martial arts as a whole. More importantly, he had developed patience and humility. He no longer sought victory for the applause or the medals. He trained because he understood that each practice, each sparring session, was a step toward becoming the best version of himself. He also began to study Chuck Norris in more depth. He watched interviews, read biographies, and observed videos of his fights. He noticed patterns, strategies, and subtle techniques that he had missed in the heat of the match. It wasn't about copying Norris. It was about learning from a master, understanding how someone could combine skill, discipline, and experience to achieve true greatness. He realized that to reach that level, he needed not only physical training but also the development of character, patience, humility, focus, and the ability to stay calm under pressure. As he trained, he started entering competitions again. This time it was different. He was no longer focused solely on winning or showing off his skills. He approached each match as an opportunity to learn, to test new strategies, and to refine his techniques. His opponents were impressed by his newfound calmness and control. Where once he might have rushed into a fight, now he assessed, reacted, and executed with precision. Victories came, but even in matches he didn't win, he found valuable lessons that pushed him further. Word began to spread about the young fighter who had faced Chuck Norris. People were curious not just about the match itself but about how he responded afterward. Instead of letting the defeat crush him, he had turned it into a catalyst for growth. He became a symbol of determination and resilience, showing that true champions do not fear failure, but use it to become stronger. During this period, he also shared his experience with younger students at his dojo. He would tell them stories of the match, not to boast, but to teach lessons about respect, humility, and the importance of continuous learning. He emphasized that being a martial artist was not about defeating others, but about improving oneself and inspiring others to do the same. The students looked up to him not only for his skill, but for the wisdom he had gained. One evening, after a long day of practice, he sat alone on the mat, reflecting. He thought about the match with Chuck Norris and realized that it had changed him more than any trophy or medal ever could. He understood that mastery was a journey, not a destination. He had seen firsthand that no matter how skilled one might be, there was always someone greater to learn from, someone whose experience could teach humility and inspire growth. This realization fueled a new goal. He wanted to continue competing, yes, but more importantly, he wanted to become a martial artist who inspired others. He wanted to combine skill with wisdom, strength with patience, and courage with respect. The path ahead was long, but he was ready. Each day became an opportunity to practice not just techniques but character. Each sparring session was a chance to learn, refine, and grow. Months later, he returned to another large martial arts gathering. This time, he watched carefully, learning from every demonstration and every match. His eyes were no longer filled with nervous excitement but with focused curiosity. He noticed subtleties in movements, the flow of energy, and the balance of mind and body. He began to see that the lessons he had learned from facing Chuck Norris were only the beginning. Mastery was not something that could be achieved quickly. It was a lifelong journey. The young champion now understood a deeper truth, that facing a great opponent was not just about winning or losing, but about discovering one's potential. The challenge had revealed his weaknesses, yes, but more importantly, it had shown him the path to improvement. Every block, every counter, every precise movement of Chuck Norris had been a guidepost, a lesson in what he could become if he committed fully to the art he loved. By the end of that year, his style had transformed. He was faster, stronger, and smarter. But beyond that, he had grown in ways that medals could never measure. His humility deepened, his respect for others grew, and his determination became unshakable. The young champion now trained not only to be a great fighter, but to be a great martial artist in every sense of the word. A person who embodied skill, wisdom, and character in every step, every kick, every breath. And so, the turning point that had begun with a challenge against a legend became the defining moment of his life. He had learned that the path to greatness was never easy, but with perseverance, humility, and continuous learning, it was possible to rise above limits, face challenges with courage, and inspire others along the way. The years that followed after his encounter with Chuck Norris were some of the most transformative of the young Taekwondo champion's life. He had matured not only as a fighter but as a person. Every day of training, every challenge faced on the mat, and every lesson learned in humility and discipline had shaped him into someone more than just a competitor. He had become a martial artist in the truest sense, a person who understood that mastery was not about trophies or recognition, but about growth, character, and the positive influence one could have on others. His journey led him to national tournaments, where the competition was fiercer than ever. Fighters came from every corner of the country, each bringing different styles and strengths. Some were larger, stronger, or faster than he was. But now, the young champion approached each match differently. He was no longer driven by pride or the desire to prove himself. Instead, he focused on strategy, observation, and adaptability. He analyzed his opponents carefully, noting their habits and weaknesses, and applied the lessons he had learned from his encounter with Chuck Norris. During one particularly important national championship, he faced an opponent who had defeated many top fighters in the region. The crowd watched eagerly, expecting an intense clash. The young champion remained calm, bowing respectfully to his opponent before the match began. As the fight started, he moved with patience, letting his opponent make the first moves. He observed, analyzed, and then responded with precision. Every kick, block, and step was deliberate. Slowly, he gained control of the match, turning his careful planning into action. In the end, he won, not through brute force or flashy moves, but through intelligence, focus, and discipline. This victory was a turning point, not because it brought another medal, but because it confirmed the lessons he had internalized, that preparation, humility, and adaptability were just as important as skill and strength. He began to understand that every opponent was an opportunity to learn, every victory a chance to stay grounded, and every defeat a lesson to grow from. The martial arts world began to take notice of him, not just as a talented fighter, but as a disciplined and thoughtful martial artist. Beyond competitions, he also began teaching younger students at his dojo. He shared the wisdom he had gained through years of training and the unforgettable lesson from Chuck Norris. He encouraged them to focus not just on winning, but on learning, improving, and respecting every person on the mat. He taught them that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to face it with determination. His students looked up to him, not only because of his victories, but because of his character, patience, and the way he inspired others to do their best. As he continued to grow, he also sought opportunities to learn from other masters. He traveled to workshops and seminars studying different martial arts styles. He discovered that every style had its own wisdom and approach, and he absorbed what he could to improve his own skills. He learned new techniques, better strategies, and more ways to control both body and mind. This constant pursuit of knowledge became a habit, a way of life, and it set him apart from others who trained only for immediate success. Despite all his achievements, he never forgot the match with Chuck Norris. It remained a defining memory, a lesson in humility, skill, and the spirit of martial arts. Whenever he faced a particularly difficult challenge, he would think back to that moment and remember the calm, controlled presence of Norris on the mat and how it had taught him more than any victory ever could. He realized that true champions were measured not just by the number of fights they won, but by their ability to inspire, teach, and continue growing. Years later, he returned to the same hall where he had faced Chuck Norris for a demonstration event. This time he wasn't there to challenge anyone. He was invited to give a demonstration and to speak to younger fighters. Standing on the mat, he shared his story, from the first days of training to the unforgettable match with Chuck Norris, and finally to the lessons he had learned since then. The students listened with wide eyes, amazed that someone who had faced a legendary fighter could share his journey with such humility and clarity. He explained that the real victory in martial arts was never about defeating someone else. It was about challenging yourself, improving every day, and learning from every experience, good or bad. He spoke about courage, respect, patience, and the power of dedication. Every word carried the weight of experience, and every lesson was reinforced by the years he had spent training, competing, and reflecting. By the time he finished, the students were not just inspired, they were motivated to take their own training seriously, to embrace challenges and to grow as martial artists. In competitions that followed, he continued to excel, but more importantly, he carried himself with a calm confidence and humility that made him a role model. He won medals, yes, but he also earned the respect of peers, teachers, and opponents alike. When he faced a new challenger, he treated them with respect, acknowledging their courage and effort regardless of the outcome. His journey had taught him that respect and character mattered as much as skill and victory. Looking back on his life, he realized how far he had come from the curious boy who had peeked into a small dojo years ago. That boy had been full of ambition but unaware of the true challenges ahead. The encounter with Chuck Norris had been a wake-up call, showing him that there was always someone greater and that every lesson, every defeat, and every success was part of a lifelong journey. It was a lesson that shaped not just his career but his life, guiding him to become a person who valued learning, respect, and perseverance above all else. He also began to see the impact he could have beyond his own achievements. Through teaching, mentoring, and sharing his story, he influenced countless others. Students who once doubted themselves began to train harder. Competitors who once sought only victory started to value discipline and respect. Parents and teachers saw that martial arts could cultivate character and resilience in young people. The young champion realized that his journey was no longer just about him. It was about the legacy he could leave in the martial arts community. In the end, the greatest victory of all was the transformation of his own mind and heart. He had learned to embrace challenges, to respect every opponent, and to see every experience as a chance to grow. He understood that no matter how talented one might be, there was always room to learn, always room to improve, and always a higher standard to reach. That lesson, more than any trophy or medal, became his guiding principle. Even as he reached the height of his career, he never stopped training. Every morning began with meditation and stretching, every afternoon with sparring and drills, and every evening with reflection and study. The discipline he had built over the years was now part of his identity, a lifelong habit that kept him sharp, humble, and inspired. And so, the young Taekwondo champion's journey came full circle. From the boy who had challenged a legend without fully knowing the stakes, to the man who had learned from that encounter, grown and inspired countless others, his story became a testament to the power of courage, humility, and perseverance. It was a story of not only achieving personal greatness but of discovering that true mastery lies in character, wisdom, and the ability to inspire others to follow their own path. In the hearts of those who heard his story, the lesson was clear. Greatness is not measured by victories alone, but by the journey of learning, the courage to face challenges, and the strength to rise each time life tests you. The young champion, now a master in his own right, embodied this truth in every kick, every movement, and every life he touched through martial arts. And in doing so, he became a living example of what it truly means to be a champion, inside and out.